Hi, algebra students. My son AJ says hi. Um, we are going to look at lesson 7.3, and we're going to start by looking at the summary page, solving quadratic equations by reasoning. Just like we have been solving equations throughout the semester, remember our process is to isolate the variable through using inverse operations. So we undo addition with subtraction, undo division with multiplication, and so forth. Remember also that to undo squaring, we can square root. So let's take a look at how we can apply these strategies to this equation here. We have 3 times the quantity x plus 1 squared minus 75 equals 0. You may recognize this if I were to change this to a y, that this is in vertex form. So when our equation is in vertex form, we do have an option for isolating the variable. And here is that process. We're going to start by adding 75 to both sides. So I will demonstrate that here. So we have remaining 3 times the quantity x plus 1 squared equals 75. Well, now we can undo multiplying by 3 by dividing by 3. So what we're going to do is divide both sides here by 3 to eliminate that. 75 divided by 3 is 25. So now we have x plus 1 squared equals 25. So I am going to think about what that means. What squared is 25? That's what this blank here is. We're asking not what does x plus 1 need to be to get 25, but what number times itself is 25? Well, we have two options, 5 times 5, or 5 squared, or negative 5 times negative 5. So negative 5 squared. Because remember, a negative times a negative is a positive number. So 5 squared equals 25 and negative 5 squared equals 25. Now this gives us two options for our x plus 1. That x plus 1 can equal positive 5 or it can equal negative 5. And we are going to consider both options. If x plus 1 equals positive 5, then x equals 4, because 4 plus 1 is 5. However, if x plus 1 equals negative 5, then x equals negative 6, because negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. So both of these values, x equals 4 and x equals negative 6, make our equation true and are thus the solutions to our equation. All right, let's go back to the example. So we have multiple equations here. Each of them have two solutions. So let's reason through this. N squared plus 4 equals 404. So I might start thinking about, how can I isolate my variable? What can I do to both sides? Well, I've got this plus 4. So let's get to work by subtracting 4 from both sides. Let's apply those inverse operations. So now we have n squared equals 400. Well, what number times itself will give us 400? Excuse me while I remind myself later to restart my computer. So n squared equals 400. You may remember that we can use the strategy of taking the square root of both sides. Okay, so let me go to our Desmos scientific calculator here. And we are going to take the square root of 400 and we get 20. You might also recognize that 20 times 20 is 400. Is that our only option though? So we know that 20 squared equals 400. Is there another option? If you remember, earlier I said if we do a negative number times a negative number, we get a positive. So 20 and negative 20 are the two solutions. Let's use that same strategy on number 2. 432 equals 3 times n squared. So I want to isolate the n squared. So I am going to undo the multiplication. So we get n squared equals 432 divided by 3. So that is 144. Okay, so now what squared gives us 144? And remember, we're going to consider a positive number, right? And consider a negative number. So what times itself is 144? Again, you can use your scientific calculator, or you might remember that 12 times 12 is 144, which means positive 12 and negative 12 are the two answers that will work. Just like we talked about in the summary for number 3, we have 144 equals the quantity n plus 1 squared. All right, well, we know if we have a value squared equaling 144, we can get positive 12 and we can get negative 12. We know that from number 2. So now what I'm going to do is set that n plus 1 equal to each of these options. Now we're going to solve by subtracting 1 from each side. So we get n equals 11. And then if I subtract 1, we get n equals negative 13. So my two answers here, n plus 1 equaling 12 or n plus 1 equaling negative 12, gives me those values of 11 and negative 13. Those are my two options. All right, let's look at number 4. N minus 5 squared minus 30 equals 70. All right, this one has multiple steps involved. Again, we're going to add 30 to both sides. It's my son Xander sneezing. So we have n minus 5 squared equals 100. So what times itself equals 100? Well, 10 or negative 10. So we know that this is going to be 10 or negative 10. So that tells me my n minus 5 can equal 10 or it can equal negative 10. So what I'm going to do now is add 5 to both sides and we get n equals 15. Again, here add n to both sides and we get n equals negative 5. So these are my two solutions. Okay? I always encourage you to go through this Are You Ready for More? And think about how you can apply the similar thinking to get answer those questions. Okay, I hope that helps, and let's get ready for lesson 7-4.